The refugee camp orbiting the fractured moon of Letharai was a grim constellation of steel, sorrow, and dust. Dozens of alien species found themselves stranded, caught between the collapsing ruins of their homelands and the cold indifference of interstellar politics. But none were more overlooked than the Tarek, six-limbed chitinous exiles with broad, expressive eyes and a matriarchal culture in tatters since their homeworld was glassed. Among them lived Zira, a single mother of 3, widowed after the orbital bombardment that took her mate. She'd arrived at Camp Aurelius with little more than a cracked satchel of belongings and a bleeding child in her arms. Most medical drones ignored the non-humanoid physiology of the Tarek. The few volunteers assigned here had more pressing concerns than another alien family no one could pronounce. But then came the new arrival, him. "Name's Dr. Mason Reed," he had said on his first day, pulling off his helmet, revealing sweat-matted brown hair and eyes full of tired compassion. "I'm here to help. All of you." The other medics thought he'd last a week at most. The conditions were brutal. Disease ran rampant, filtration systems barely worked, and some species emitted pheromones that made humans violently ill. But Mason stayed. He set up an open-air triage station and saw anyone, regardless of shape, color, or blood type. And then he met Zira. It was her youngest daughter, Lixie, barely old enough to walk on her own spindly legs. She had fallen through rusted paneling and shattered her exoskeletal knee. Zira, frantic and unable to speak standard well, had carried her to the main tent. The receptionist barely looked up. Mason had overheard her cries. "She's burning up," he'd said as he gently took Lixie from her arms, laying the trembling child on a mat. "How long's she been like this?" Zira couldn't answer. Her grasp of English was fragmented. But her eyes, huge and multifaceted, were soaked with panic. Mason didn't need a translator to understand. For hours he worked, improvising treatments based on comparative xenobiology, drawing diagrams in the dirt to reassure the worried mother. When he finally stabilized the child and handed her back, Zira did something no Tarek had done to a human since the war. She bowed her head low and murmured a phrase in her native tongue. Mason asked what it meant. "You have made space in your den for us," she said shyly. Word spread like plasma fire. The human medic wasn't just tolerating aliens. He was treating them like people. But Zira started bringing her other children to the clinic regularly. Not just for injuries but for lessons. Mason noticed they would sit quietly nearby while he worked, watching how he cleaned wounds or took readings from a scanner. One day, after everyone else had gone, Zira remained. "You fix," she said slowly, tapping her chest. "But also," she gestured at her children, now napping in the sun like curled-up beetles. "You protect." Mason grinned. "That's kind of the point, isn't it?" She tilted her head. "No. Others do not." He blinked. It was true. Many other medics treated non-human refugees like chores or problems to be solved, not lives to be mended. Zira had noticed what others hadn't. Weeks passed. Mason and Zira grew closer, though neither of them quite realized it at first. He helped her find food vouchers, organized proper schooling for her children with what little digital modules he had. And in return, she taught him basic Tarek language, often using children's songs to demonstrate sentence structure. She laughed the first time he tried to pronounce a word that required a vibrating subharmonic hum. "You sound like nesting larva," she teased, her mandibles clicking in amusement. "Well, your accent when saying scalpel sounds like you're trying to order coffee," Mason shot back, grinning. They weren't just doctor and patient anymore. They were something warmer. But not everyone appreciated the bond. "Keep your distance, Doc," warned one of the guards from the interstellar peacekeeping force. That bug woman's kind bred a generation of soldiers before they lost the war. They're not innocent. Mason ignored him. He'd heard worse. When rations ran short and tempers ran high, the camp flared into violence. A xenophobic group among the refugees began harassing alien families, especially those like Zira, who were visibly different. One night, while returning from a water station, Zira and her children were cornered. Mason found them huddled in the corner of his clinic tent the next morning, bruised and shaking. He didn't say anything, just quietly applied salves and dressed wounds. Then he did something no one expected. He reported it, not just to the peacekeeping force, but to the Galactic Humanitarian Tribunal. A hearing was ordered. Video footage mysteriously vanished, and most witnesses were uncertain. But one thing was undeniable. A human medic had stood up for an alien family when no one else would. He was reassigned for his own safety within days. Zira panicked when she heard. She found him near the landing pads, stuffing a duffel into a shuttle crate. "You go?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "They say it's not safe for me anymore," he said, trying to keep it light. "But don't worry. I'll keep working on getting you off this rock. There are better stations. Safer ones." She stepped forward, clutching one of his sleeves. No hope before you. You make hope. You'd stay home." Her words stunned him. "I'm not your." She raised one of her hands, smaller, more delicate than the rest, and placed it over his heart. "Not yet," she said. Silence hung between them like mist. Then Mason nodded slowly. "Okay, we'll stay. But only if I can be yours." Zira's mandibles trembled, and to his surprise, her eyes welled. "You already are," she whispered. The tribunal heard of his choice. Word spread. Donations poured in. Pressure mounted. Suddenly, funding for Camp Aurelius tripled. A new housing module was shipped. Medical pods arrived. All because a single human medic had chosen to stay with an alien woman and her children instead of abandoning them. A year later, Mason and Zira officially bonded in both human and Taurak customs. The ceremony was strange, beautiful, and utterly chaotic, especially when her youngest tried to crawl into the fusion generator because it looked fun. He adopted her children legally under the Interstellar Compact. When asked later by a reporter why he did it, Mason simply replied, "No one hoped for them. That was the problem. All they needed was someone to believe they were worth the effort." Zira stood beside him, taller than he was now that she'd molted into her full adult form, and placed a clawed hand in his. "And he did," she added. "Now they call him Nest Father. It is the greatest title we know." Years passed. The once-forgotten camp became a symbol. New policies were named after it. Other medics followed Mason's example, seeing firsthand the ripple effects of compassion without species limits. And on the moons of Letharai, the tale was retold again and again, of a single mother no one helped, and the human who chose her anyway.